Well, hello and welcome to Hugh's Reviews, the place for movie views and spoiler clues. Well, this week's going to be a little bit different because we're not talking about movies, we are talking about the Disney Plus television series, The Mandalorian. Mandalorian Season 2 is over, and this show has been one of the most critically successful projects Disney has released in this franchise yet. Even the folks that hated the sequel trilogy and every other thing they squeezed out of Lucas's dying sphincter love this show. And I do too. Which is why I've got to address why the last 5 minutes of the Season 2 finale sucked. First big problem, Luke Skywalker. Look, I'm a Star Wars fanatic from way the heck back, and I have lived and breathed this franchise to an almost alarming degree for a long time. So you can trust me when I say, I love Luke Skywalker! He was my hero growing up. But can we have one friggin' thing in the Star Wars canon that doesn't somehow directly relate to a single family of magic saber jockeys? Even in the sequels, Rey changed her name to Skywalker, thereby retroactively making a Skywalker, once again, the savior of the universe. The best thing about The Mandalorian was how cool it was to see them doing some fresh world building instead of relying so heavily on nostalgia. But in Season 2, they leaned on that nostalgia button so hard it broke. The first Jedi they meet, Luke's dad's old Padawan. Yeah, cool, everybody loves a Sakatano, but come on, Favreau, dig a little! They go to Tatooine so often it should have a tourism kiosk. See the Sarlacc pit, 5 creds off if your kid gets digested. And there was so much more that I don't have time to get into. And don't tell me that it's not possible to open up the EU and get inspiration. The only reason Thrawn exists is because of some now defunct non-canon novels, and now he's not only canon, but a fan favorite across multiple platforms. So why the heck can't they do that with a new Jedi? Having the Jedi that Grogu, and by the way, that name sucks. It sounds like goo-goo, like baby noises. And 10 years from now, the only people who are going to remember it are going to be hardcore weirdos like me, and the rest of the world's just going to be like, hey, remember the Baby Yoda show? But having the Jedi that Grogu summoned be Luke just shrinks the Star Wars universe yet again. I called it the second Tano even mentioned summoning another Jedi, and Disney played the worst, most obvious card they had, because at this point, Star Wars is creatively bankrupt. Come on, guys. An entire sci-fi fantasy galaxy is your playground. Explore it! But Luke showed up. Fine. That whole fight scene with the Dark Troopers? It had my 10-year-old brain jumping up and down and screaming with joy. It was awesome! This was the first time we see Luke Skywalker as the butt-kicking Jedi Master we all wanted to see. Well, except for Last Jedi, but seeing as that was an astral projection and not Luke in person, it kind of almost doesn't count. So this was really cool. And then we see his face. Yikes. The second Luke takes off his hood and you see that PlayStation 2 Uncanny Valley Wax Museum Monster Mash face, I was too weirded out to look at anything else. You thought Tarkin and Leia's digifaces in Rogue One were bad? This was a magnitude worse for me. And speaking of faces, let's talk about Din Djarin, the Mandalorian himself. When Djarin takes off his helmet to reveal his face to the kid, it's supposed to be a powerful and emotional moment. And it could have been. Except we've seen his face 2 other times for minutes on end, so who cares anymore? I mean, yeah, the kid hasn't seen his face, but the audience had seen it so much that it ceased to be special. From the very beginning of the series, they wrote this rule in that the Mando sect Djarin was part of had strict rules about non-Mandos seeing their faces. So, when at the end of the first season he had to choose between dying and losing the kid or revealing his face and saving him, he broke his own code and took off his helmet. It was such a powerful moment. Sure, Djarin lost a bit of his mystery, but it connected him with the audience and let us know he's not a droid, he's not invulnerable. He's a fragile young man trying to do what's right. And when Baby Yoda saw his face at the end of Season 2, it could have been just as powerful, if not more so. Except for one thing. We as the audience got a full-on look at him for about 10 minutes not one episode ago, and for the single stupidest reason they could have contrived. So, you mean to tell me that the Empire, one of the most experienced and sophisticated powers to ever rule the galaxy, has a security system so poorly designed that all you have to do is walk into the lunchroom, show a Mac 64 your face, and if you're not on the most wanted list, you have full access? Sure, they also have to have an officer's access rod, which, okay, sounds dirty now that I say it out loud, but they could have stolen that. And as long as whoever puts it in isn't a known criminal, they can access the most sensitive secrets the Empire has? Are you kidding me? That'd be like if the Pentagon put a terminal in a private elementary school cafeteria and any toddler who wants to can launch a nuclear strike. Stupid doesn't even begin to describe it. How about asinine and negligent? And then, after we have minute after minute of seeing the Mando's face, well, Bill Burr, a guy who once had a stand-up comedy bit about punching muffins, steals every second of their combined scene. Us seeing Dejaren's face was completely unnecessary. And then, less than an hour of screen time later, Dejaren whips off his shiny hat again, and it's supposed to be a big deal? Maybe for the kid it was, since he's the only one left in the known galaxy who doesn't know what he looks like, but for the audience, it suffered from familiarity diffusing impact. And yes, the rest of the galaxy will know what his face looks like because the Empire's Central Security Network literally took his picture, and that mugshot is just waiting to be uploaded to space Twitter. You know, I wouldn't be that upset about these issues, but avoiding them would have been so easy, it's pathetic. The rule about the Mando taking off his helmet was just written in so they could break it. How about not doing that? Writing rules just so you can break them is a lazy way to build tension. You don't have to show the audience his face when he takes off his helmet the first 2 times. Creative camera angles could have kept him in shadows or out of focus and still allowed the man a sense of mystery and menace. They figured it out with Karl Urban and Dredd, for goodness sakes, so why not here? And if you're gonna insist on Dejaren's stringent code, and you're gonna insist on those same scenes where he's unmasked, then you can still use those same camera angles and tricks to hide his face from the audience, if not from his fellow characters. Then, when he at last willingly reveals his face to Grogu, the audience can see him for the first time as well, allowing us to connect emotionally better with the importance of the moment for the kid. Instead, we've seen his dopey mug so often that the look of wonder on Grogu's face plays like a kid who already knows what his Christmas presents are, but has to pretend to be surprised so his parents don't know he peeked. Familiarity lessens emotional impact. The same is true of Skywalker's appearance. Sure, it brings in the nostalgia bucks and scores some cheap emotional points, but bringing in a lesser-known character, or even a completely new one, and developing them properly, would have gone a long way toward world building instead of world shrinking. For goodness sakes, if they really wanted to, they could have finally bridged the gap between Karen Traviss and Lucasfilm. Traviss, for those who don't know, wrote the Republic Commando novels, which were the go-to end-all be-all for Mandalorian lore for the better part of a decade. That is, until Lucas told her to Senye and retcon Mandos into peaceniks and anybody who wore the armor into terrorist nutjobs in the Clone Wars TV series. But in the pages of Travis's books lay one character that could not only have rebuilt that bridge, but opened up a storyline hyperspace pathway heretofore undreamed. Imagine, if you will, a Clone Wars-era Jedi General turned Mandalorian. Barton Jusik was all of those things. Imagine it. Din Djarin not only hands the kid over to a temple-trained Jedi, but a fellow Mandalorian warrior. The kid is safe, he'll get trained, and he is entrusted to a man who lives according to a code of honor not too dissimilar from Djarin's own. How was that not even an option? Oh, right, easy is better and Skywalkers are the laziest out. Familiarity breeds contempt, and I'm starting to have some serious contempt for the lack of new ideas. Favreau and team tried to forge a new path, but when push comes to shove, Disney will always take the lazy way out and replay the same tired material until it breaks. You think I'm wrong? Look at their live-action remakes. Look at what would have come down the MCEU pike if the pandemic hadn't slowed them down long enough to think straight. The next phase of the MCU would have been as big a cluster as the Star Wars sequels, and we would have been too bored to go to the theater even if the theaters were open. The Mandalorian is a good show, but if they keep folding this thing in on itself instead of expanding into new territory, then Star Wars is going to look like an overworked origami crab. Ripped, shredded, and only vaguely interesting for discussion on when they should have known when to move on. And the last 5 minutes of the Mandalorian Season 2 finale are another worrying example. By the way, you do know Baby Yoda being given over to Luke means Baby Yoda's dead now, right? Just go rewatch the sequel movies. You'll figure it out. And that is it for Hugh's Reviews. Thanks once again to Moons of Vega Photography and the Slice Print Roleplay 3D Printing Forum. Those folks are awesome. If you haven't looked them up, do so right now, but not until you hit subscribe. Thank you very much. If you've got any suggestions or feedback, please shoot me a line, and as always, happy viewing!